Welcome, my friends, to the Far Post Podcast, presented by Massachusetts 250, commemorating a history of possibility. Plan your revolutionary weekend at massachusetts250.org. Revolution fans, you may remember we briefly, ever so briefly, returned with an episode of the Far Post Podcast. Back in early March, we were on location at the Concord Museum.
Whetted people's appetites.
We really did. Yeah, just wanted to kind of let people know, hey, we're still around. We're still here. We're still a thing. We're going to be coming back with some more episodes later in the year. Got to visit all of the exhibits and artifacts at the Concord Museum, including Paul Revere's lanterns. It was an incredible afternoon. But I'm really excited about today because today we get to begin really digging into what the Far Post Podcast is going to be all about this year. We're exploring some of the biggest stories with some of the most important figures throughout the Revolution's first 29 seasons. By way of quick introductions, my name is Jeff Lemieux. I'm still here, regrettably, for a lot of people.
Oh, there they are. I knew they were around.
Yeah. They can't boo me rocking the 96
They're not booing the jersey.
Revs kit.
They're not booing the jersey.
We didn't pull this out of storage, by the way. This is my kit that my parents purchased for me when I was 10 years old at a Revs game.
I'm remarkably impressed at the condition.
It's in really good condition.
We've been trying to rebuild the archive, so I can tell you how much it costs to buy one of those on eBay, and they're not in that sort of condition. So well done to you.
Well, I might have to use that as a negotiating tactic because either I need a raise or I'm going to sell my Revs 96 kit.
You will get good money for it. We can enter negotiations right after the show.
By the way, what size do you think this is? I bought this as a 10-year-old child, and I'm swimming in it now.
Yeah, the 90s went large.
This was a small kit.
Goodness gracious.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Well, quick intros as well. We've got Cathal Conlon here.
Hello.
How's
One
it
of the
going?
best Irish people ever.
Really is one of the best Irish people ever.
Yes.
And Jason Dalrymple.
Hello.
Jason, how's it going?
It's going great. Great to be back.
But most importantly, our special guest today is a man whose name will forever be etched into the Revolution history books as the first goal scorer in club history, Rob Ukrop. Rob, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me on. That was a long time ago, 30 years, right?
You're getting a round of applause here in the studio as well, just to make sure you could hear that. Is that how you typically introduce yourself? Hey, guy, I'm Rob Ukrop, first goal scorer in New England Revolution history.
Yeah, that rarely comes up, but there are a few people that like the creativity of that New England day down in Tampa. So that was a good memory for me, good memory for a lot of friends and family. Sorry, I was only there for a short time, but had great memories and really appreciate the Kraft family and all they did to get that team off the ground back in 1996.
I was going to ask how often it comes up, because if that was me, if I had scored the first goal in an original MLS club's history, I think I'd be that'd be like...
You would be insufferable.
Yeah, I'd be telling people all the time. So it very rarely comes up. You're not the type of guy to use that as like a, fun fact about yourself.
The goals are always fun to score, but when you lose the game, they don't really matter. That's how I look at it. And I still remember late in that game, I had a flashing header that went off the side of the post, and that would have tied it up 3-3. It would have been the first hat trick in MLS, which would have been cool, but it was not to be on that day. So anytime you don't win, it's not as memorable for me. You're out there with a bunch of guys that you worked hard with for a preseason out in the cold and then down at Boca Raton, and the fact that we lost was super disappointing.
I remember talking to you about this 10 years ago when we were doing 20th anniversary stories for the Revs, and now it's 10 years later. We're doing 30th anniversary stories, and that is something that you mentioned during our brief conversation that, yeah, the 2 goals were great. Being the first goal scorer in Revs history was great, but the one that stuck with you most, in true striker fashion, I feel, you said the one I really remember is the one that I didn't score that would have been the hat trick. That's just the life of a striker, right?
Yeah, again, I scored a few goals in my career, and I don't remember a ton of them. Maybe 1 or 2 really stand out. I do remember the New England goals just because you continue every 10 years to ask me about them, so I replayed it in my mind, which has been fun. But, down here in Richmond, I'm involved with the Richmond Kickers, which is the longest consecutively run professional team in the country, and Darren Sawatsky, who was my old teammate with the Revs, and my roommate, he's our sporting director, head coach. So, once in a while, guys will ask about it, or, we'll wind each other up about that first game or that first.
Just want to make sure we didn't lose your audio. We just maybe 1 second there. You just say something.
there?
Oh,
There you go.
Yeah, I think we lost your audio just very briefly there, but yeah, you mentioned being with the Richmond Kickers. Just to start off, we'll go back and kind of work chronologically through the mid '90s and the preseason with the Revs and being the part of an original MLS team. But tell the people what you're up to now, because you have had a long, distinguished career in soccer, and you're still obviously very heavily involved in the game now.
I think I would go back to my college days. So my family was in the grocery business for many, many years. And my senior year of college, my dad asked me to, he sent me a couple produce books and said, hey, we'd like you to be a produce buyer within the family, be a produce expert, if you will. And it didn't sound super exciting to me. But he also told me another piece of wisdom. And he said this is what his dad shared with him, is that find something that you love to do every day and it won't seem like work. And I just had this great opportunity to continue my soccer career based on my experience at Davidson College and Charlie Slagle. So I had some opportunities, and then, the game's been really good to me. And I think one of the things we learned from our family and my grandparents, my parents, is that you want to be involved in your community, wherever that is. And for me, soccer was the connection. It was an easy way to stay involved, whether I was playing as a professional or whether I was coaching or working with youth players, whatever it was, it just seemed like a natural fit for me. So I've been involved with the game the last several years. Since 2019, I've got a group of college teammates that we have a group called 22 Holdings that bought the Richmond Kickers professional team. So we've been running that, and then we added the women's W League team, Richmond Ivy, 2 years ago. So we're really off and running with the soccer and trying to make sure that it's a core piece of our community here in Richmond. We run City Stadium, which is one of the, I'm not sure if it's the oldest in the country, but it was built in the 1920s. We have some great memories down there. We've had some incredible teams, soccer teams, and other things coming through that venue. So we worked through that to really create a community hub so that Richmond is a connected community where whatever your background, whatever your beliefs, it's a chance for you to come out to the stadium, whether it's a farmer's market, whether it's a professional soccer game, a W League game, a church event, whatever it is. We want to make sure people are coming together in Richmond and, just sharing their experiences and making our community stronger.
It's awesome.
Ton of really cool connections between the Revs and the Richmond Kickers as well. I mean, you mentioned Darren Zawadzki being the head coach. I know we're going to have Jeff Causey on with Darren Zawadzki pretty soon. Jeff Causey's got connections to the Kickers. Even Matt Turner. Matt Turner went on loan to the Richmond Kickers for a while. That's really where he got most of his early professional minutes, was with the Richmond Kickers. And now, obviously, Matt, a Premier League goalkeeper, U.S. national team starter. So
FA Cup winner.
FA Cup winner as well. Yep, added to the list. Yeah. So really cool connections between the Revs and Richmond. But let's get back in the Wayback Machine, because you mentioned coming out of Davidson College in 1993. MLS didn't start till 1996. I'm wondering sort of what that 3-year period was like for you, trying to kind of forge your way as a professional soccer player pre-MLS, and what that was like just trying to make it as a pro.
So I finished up 1992 was the fall. I came back for an extra semester. The previous year, I actually had I broke my leg our second game of the season, so I got a medical red shirt. We were playing at Chapel Hill. I remember I was in a collision with Greg Berhalter. Right when I landed, there's no contact. He was just marking me at the top of the 18, and I landed. I remember breaking my leg, and in the, I guess back in the way back days, you could actually talk trash, and I think he said some I don't know, maybe words we wouldn't use on this podcast towards me and taunting me as I lay down there with a broken leg. But it was great because, there's no person, there's nothing personal about it, just kind of how you're competitors and getting in each other's head. So I remember laying on the ground, and it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. So I came back for that next year at Davidson with a medical red shirt. Ended up with a class of 8 seniors. I added to that. So there was 9 of us, and we made a storied run to the NCAA Final Four that happened to be hosted down at Davidson that year. It had been sold out before the season kicked off. So it was this epic journey, and it just gave me the platform to score some goals. And, I caught the eyes of some different folks. I had a couple crazy things happen. I got drafted to play indoor soccer with the Baltimore Spirit at the time. I did end up signing a contract with them. But I did have a couple other cool things happen out of that. I had got called into the U23 men's national team. At the time, it was called the B team, with all the big names that from my era, with those guys could really play. Claudio Reyna, Brian McBride, Mike Burns. So, some future teammates there with Mike Burns. So it was this really great experience, and we're just chasing it wherever you could. So I ended up signing to play indoor soccer for 6 months. At the same time, the Richmond Kickers indoor was coming along. So, Richmond Kickers outdoor, the USISL started up in 1993. So I started playing a few games with them between my time with the U23s. And at the time, you were looking to play indoor, outdoor, just to have a few wages to pay the bills, and you move from city to city every 6 months. So it was a really cool experience. I think I did have one opportunity to go sign, or at least on a trial for 30 days with Eintracht Frankfurt. I can remember the debate in January of 1993. My mom and dad. My dad said, "Go for it." My mom's like, "But I want you to walk and graduate with your sister in May." And it was just a tough decision. That was probably the one thing that I did in my soccer career that I didn't follow up on, and maybe I had a little bit of regret. But it set me off this great journey that ended up with some incredible friendships and lifetime memories.
Was there ever any point where you thought about walking away in that 3-year span, or were you determined that you were going to make it work whatever way you had to do to make it work?
No, so it was cool because 1993 we played in the university games up in Buffalo, New York. Jim Lennox was a coach, the famed Hartwick coach and U.S. soccer instructor. Just a great man. I learned so much from Jim. We were down in training camp down in New Orleans, and we were in one session, and we're sitting in there watching video, and he was, a couple guys fell asleep, and he turned the lights on, and he lit into us, and he said, I know not everybody here likes me. That's understandable. It's how it works. But every coach that you're going to have in your career, you're going to learn something from them. And it's going to impact your life, not only as a soccer player, but as a human being. And I just remember that moment. And it reminded me that, every situation you're in, it's not always perfect, but there are learning opportunities. And he did this training drill with us. And the guys that played in the midfield, he actually tied a rope around them. So you had 4 guys throughout the midfield, and there's rope. So when the one guy on the right side pulled forward, and it would pull the next guy into shape, and just one of these training exercises that seemed crazy back in the day. But, he was a great advocate for developing young soccer players. And, he had some incredible success with his Hartwick teams with Matt Camasco. And, Mike Burns was one of my favorite players to play with, just a understated guy that you look at and you're like, I could run by the guy, but you couldn't for some reason, right?
I love it. We'll have to get Burnsy on one of the shows, and we'll revisit the early days of the Revs with him as well. Well, you get to 1996, or maybe it's 1995. You start hearing rumblings about Major League Soccer forming and there being this new league in the United States, coming off of the success, obviously, of the 1994 World Cup on U.S. soil. So what's going through your head when you heard about Major League Soccer? Was that immediately something that you thought you wanted to be an option for you?
No. So what was happening in 1993? You knew the World Cup was coming in '94. Bora Milutinovic was the head coach. I think every college soccer player really was, very few went to Europe. Everybody wanted to make that team. And, after playing with in 93 at the university games, I did get a call in to that first team. And for some reason, a couple of days before the camp, I accepted it. I got called in, and then they said, "Hey, we've decided not to take you." So it was one of those things. I'm like, man, this is how close this is, right? A couple other guys, I think Alan Prampin, Eric Emler, a couple of the guys that I was friends with got called in, and I think Eric ended up doing his ACL on the trip. But you start thinking about how close these trips are to making that national team that's going to play in the World Cup. So there was some excitement about that. So as a young player, you just wanted to play wherever you could. It didn't matter whether it was some pickup while you're at home for a couple of days, whether you went into a training camp somewhere. So there was always that. And then, 94 came. I can remember being out at the World Cup final with my dad. I think we went with Coca-Cola or Snickers since we were in the food industry. But I can remember sitting out there and watching that game from the Rose Bowl, and I was sitting in the Brazilian section with some corporate types, and the corporate types kept asking, when are they going to sit down? And I'm like, they're not going to sit down. And this is before the game kicked off, right? They're singing, they're chanting, they're dancing. And then, this great final with, I think Baggio missed the penalty right at the end of the game, right? So, that was kind of fostered that love of the game for me. So for me, it was like, how do I get to play at the highest level possible? I came back in '94. I signed with the team in Raleigh Flyers. I'd been in Dayton, Ohio previously. I got traded on the indoor spot. So just loading in my car, going to the next city, it was just fun. I mean, I had no ties anywhere other than just being a single guy that wanted to keep playing soccer at the best level he could find, making friends. Packed up my white Volvo 740 intercooler turbo and just drive to the next city. It was great. Back then with the old, the big TVs that you had, no flat screen. So I'd figure out how to get my TV in my car, my 36-incher. That was my prized possession.
Well, when MLS does roll around and there's a college, or it wasn't a college draft, there was a college draft, but you had been out of college for a few years. They had just an MLS draft. Like, what was that process like? Did you have to submit to be in the draft? Did you know it was a possibility to get drafted? Like, what was that process like?
So in '95, we had loaded up a team in Richmond. A guy named Bobby Lennon said, "Hey, we're going to go all out," and we had a ton of young guns. Jeff Causey was our goalkeeper. Richie Williams was our sixth. Ben Crowley was one of our attacking midfielders, forwards. Kevin Scott, Kari Stockton, Brian Kamler, Todd Yeagley, Mike Clark. Mike Clark had quite the career, so did Brian as well in MLS. So we had a MLS-ready team in Richmond, and we ended up winning the USISL Premier League, and then we went up and did the double with the US Open Cup in 1995. So we had a lot of eyeballs on our team. Our coach was Dennis Violet, the famed Busby Babe from Manchester United many years before. So we were loaded up, and we played the best teams. We took them out. I remember the Open Cup run. I think we played Atlanta at home, John Doyle, who was a World Cup veteran from the 1990 World Cup, and we took those guys down in the Chicago Sting, and we beat the El Paso Patriots in the final. But there's just so many great memories of playing with really high-quality soccer players at the time. And we all knew the MLS was coming, and then based on that team success, the majority of our team got invited into that combine out in California. So it was pretty epic. I think Darren Sawatsky tells the stories much better than I do. He's got less concussions, that's for sure. But just being out there for that really, I don't know what you want to call it, whether it's a combine, but that first MLS combine, I mean, all the coaches would sit around the edge of the fields. You were playing 11 aside. I mean, just playing against guys like just really watching Bruce Murray, who I used to watch, I'm like, man, this guy can score goals like there's no tomorrow. And just watching him in those games, it was really cool for a young player like myself to watch these guys play. So that's where that was a genesis for me. And, I showed well. I had talked to a couple different coaches and had some interest from different places. I was surprised I got drafted by New England. That was I didn't really know Coach Stapleton very much, or Brian O'Donovan, but something they saw and they liked me and they took a chance on me. So I really appreciate that. And, while, like I said, I was there for 6 months before contracts got guaranteed. It was an impactful 6 months in terms of, how his ownership would treat players and teams. I know football was the primary business, but seeing Jonathan and Mr. Kraft around the locker room and, really, whether it was a side business for them, they showed enough interest that it made me say, hey, if I'm ever in this spot, I like to make sure that I understand my players and I interact with them and make sure they feel appreciated by us. So that's what we try and do here in Richmond, much like the Crafts did back in the day.
Do you remember what your thought process was when you heard New England? Not just in terms of playing there, but moving to New England? Do you remember what that immediate reaction was?
Yeah, I'm like, let's go score some goals. Let's win some games, right? That's it didn't matter where. It was nice that it's on the East Coast because it was easy for my family to travel to. But there's everybody's thinking, hey, it'd be great to go to DC because it's just 2 hours down the road. That didn't work out. Bruce built really powerhouse in the early days of MLS and seemed to be ahead of all the other coaches just because of his knowledge of the college game and the American athlete. I think that's one of the reasons you saw the success he had in the 2002 World Cup. He just had an understanding of players and how to make them fit together and knew what buttons to push, rightly or wrongly. He was very good at that. So I think that's why you saw the teams that had success. I think in New England, it was a bit of a struggle. I'm not sure that Coach Stapleton, I loved him as a human being, man. That guy is the ultimate competitor. He played with us in training, but I don't think he had the experience or the ability to connect with each of his players to get the best out of us.
With that said, what was that preseason like? Because I'm sure nobody knew exactly what to expect. It's a whole new group of guys and a whole new league and a whole new team. Like, how long was preseason? What was it? What was preseason like with that group?
So I felt like we got up there sometime early January, and we started off in a bubble at Old Foxborough, right? So we're in there, and it's cold, and we're living in hotels. We're like, do we get an apartment? Do we wait to see if we make the team? There's all these variables that they're unknowns, right? And to be fair, nobody could answer because it's a brand new league. So we had a lot of laughs, a lot of fun together. The guys stuck together, I thought, really well. We trained at Babson College. Once we got back, we went down to Boca Raton for a couple weeks. So just living out of a hotel, like it was I guess I was 25 or 26 at the time. It was amazing. I'm like, this is great. Hotel, I don't have to make my bed. Somebody's gonna make it for me. I got clean sheets. All the things that you like. I'm living out of basically 2 bags, right? You got my soccer bag and then just some normal clothes to walk around a little bit at night. So, a lot of cool moments. We did these preseason games, with the other teams. It was fun. I remember a game, I think it's maybe the game that I qualified or was maybe not qualified, but it's the game when I realized that I think that the coaching staff really liked me. Coach McKeechin from Vermont, coach one of my high school teammates up there, Eric Myers, and then Coach Stapleton. We were playing, and I believe his name was Uche Okafor. He played for Nigeria in the World Cup. He was a center back for the at the time, I guess they were called the Wiz, right? The Kansas City Wiz. Now it's the Wizards. Yep. But there's a ball I got played through, and I had him on my hip, and I turned him, and it was me just attacking the goal. I think Tony Miola was in goal at the time. No, he wasn't there yet. I'm not sure who the goalkeeper was, but I remember turning Uche Okafor, and I had him on my back, and he was, he's a physical. I mean, he's just a chiseled piece of muscle, and I had him on my back, and I just ran with him on my back for about 30 yards, and I think I slotted it home, and there was a moment that I was like, this is pretty cool. This guy played in a World Cup, and I just sorted him out. Now, he might sort me out the rest of the game, but I think it was those little moments that you give yourself confidence, and, the coaches are trying to figure it out. I think as a player, you're trying to find out if you belong, and how do you fit into the structure in New England? At that time, I felt really confident. I felt like every time I touched the ball in the box, I could score a goal. And then we got off that good start in down in Tampa Bay at Houlihan Stadium. It just felt like goals. I mean, 2 goals. We lost the game, like I said earlier, but just felt like I could score anytime the ball got in. Now, that being said, I was released, I think right at the end of June. But, I wasn't scoring at that point. As a target forward, that limited mobility, I think I brought some different qualities to the game that I think the coaching staff appreciated. But for me to be successful scoring goals, both goals I scored were due to quality service. And I think the way that we played wasn't set up for a target forward like me to have continued success there.
I do love that you said you don't remember a ton of the goals that you scored throughout your career, but you have a vivid memory of that one in a preseason game turning Uche Okafor because it was potentially the moment that secured a spot on the roster. Like I love that one was one of the vivid memories that you're able to hold on to. And before we get into that game itself, where you mentioned you scored the 2 goals in the first ever Revs game, what was life like in New England? I mean, you mentioned Darren Sawatsky was a roommate of yours. Like, were you living with other Revs players? What was kind of day-to-day like for guys in their mid-20s playing professional soccer?
Yeah, it was great. We were trying to figure out where to live, and I know Jim St. Andre and Pete Woodring, I think Zach Gibson, they want to live on I can't even think of the name of the street down there in the heart of the city, but they had an apartment right in the middle of the action. This is not good for me. It sounds awesome, right? But, I'm here to play soccer. So Darren and I, we had an apartment in Quincy. Apparently, Mo Vaughn lived in the same building. Apparently, he took out one of the walls, so he had a double-sized apartment. We didn't see him much. I guess he had other things to do at night. But we did have a couple other guys that lived in the building with us, Welton and Beto Nevada. I think I'll attribute Darren did a really nice job. I think we were asked by the Revs front office to look out for those guys. I think we gave them some riser practice, and I can remember they asked us to come over and set up their speaker system. I'm like, man, this is kind of cool. If you're an international, you have other people setting your stuff up. So
Yeah.
I think that was an important, for us, it was important as a teammate to make sure that Welton, Beto got off to a good start. I think there's a funny story that obviously Darren remembers a lot of this stuff better than I do, but I think they were thinking about getting rid of Welton right away. Like up in the cold in the bubble, it was a mess. Like you could tell he's from Brazil. He's like what are we doing? It was on turf. It's just cold. And to be honest, he struggled. But a lot of people didn't. To the Revs' credit and to Frank and Ron, I think they were patient, because when we got down to Boca Raton, there's one day we did this 1v1 game where the defender would come flying from the 18, I believe, and then the ball get driven to midfield, and the attacking player will receive it at midfield, and it's a one-on-one. It's like a whole half-field one-on-one, and Lexi's not afraid of a tackle, and who was it? Ian Fraser, some guys that like to get into a tackle, and Welton would dribble by everybody. He made everybody look like cones. Like, he must have scored 10 straight times, and we're all like, geez, man, this guy can take people on. So that 1v1 quality that you saw with Welton once he got warmer, he showed that to us, and we're like, man, this guy's a class player. So that was one of those other memories that I recall, that I think that was the moment they're like, hey, he's going to be a dangerous attacking player for us. Now, can he find a pass when he needs to make the pass? That will be the big question, like all midfielders.
Well, he helped answer that, at least in some respect, in that first ever game, because while you have the first goal in Revolution history, it was Welton who assisted the first goal in Revolution history. But as you're heading down to that first game in Tampa, I'm sure there's a ton of anticipation around what this is going to be like, the first game in club history, all this stuff. Like, what do you remember about going down there, the travel, and maybe the kind of the build up to that day? Because it was, maybe you didn't know at the time it was a historical moment, but in the end it was a historical moment.
Yeah, it was. We got down there, and I remember I think I've told you this before, we spent some time in the mall. I used to travel with my camcorder, so I had the camcorder, and we were in the we're in the makeup section. We're in the mall just trying to meet girls, right? It's a bunch of guys, a bunch of young idiots, Ted Chronopoulos, Darren, John DeBrito. We're just walking around, just trying to take it all in, because, it's a professional sport. The next day you might be gone. We saw a bunch of our friends get cut over the previous 3 months in the training camp. So, you just want to enjoy each day. So, we're walking around the mall. We probably went to Cinnabon and, what is on Annie's Pretzels. All the stuff that you like to do in a mall, and you're 25, 26 years old. You're like, hey, this is great. So we're just walking around, and then, we had our team meal, and we got on the bus to ride to the stadium. And for, I think, most of us, this is the first time. Most places you play, you got your gear in your backpack, and you get off the bus, and we walked in, and you got a couple jerseys in case you get dirty in the first half. Don't want to get too sweat, right? So you have you got the uniforms, and you got your boots waiting in there. And I believe it might have been when we went to Columbus, but I remember getting the hotel room in Columbus, and I was an Adidas player at the time, and I had a big shoebox full of new Adidas shoes straight from Germany. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. So you just felt like you got treated really well. It was cool. And then, we walk out on the field, and there's probably 25 to 30,000 people at Old Houlihan Stadium. And the lesson I learned when I was a little kid, my high school coach and my club coach, they always said, hey, if it's a big game or you're nervous, just take a look around, find a mom, your dad, somebody that's going to encourage you and cheer for you, and just smile at them and just take it in and know that you're making them proud, whatever happens. And then you roll the dice and go compete as hard as you can. So, it was a really cool memory that day. Just even warming up, you're like, I don't think I needed to warm up. I was like, I'm ready to fly, right? That's just how it works. Even today I coach high school sports, and my high school team, I try and start every high school game 5 minutes early, and the other coach says, what are you doing, coach? And I'm like, they don't want to warm up. They're ready to go. Like, right? You get in the field, you feel pretty good. Let's go. Let's get this thing started. So that's how it felt down that first day in Tampa Bay.
Do you still have the tapes from the camcorder?
I do. I don't know that I can. Yeah, uh-oh. Darren's asked me not to look through them. But, they called him Tarzan back in the day. I had a full head of hair. But it was just fun. I probably have stuff just sitting us around in our apartment talking about what we hated, what we didn't like, what we loved, right? I think one fond memory that I have, we got invited to be part of a fashion show up there in the first couple weeks. And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, no, they've asked for you to, I think maybe because I scored a goal or two. So I got invited into the thing, and Darren as well. So I can remember I had a girlfriend back home, and she's like, I don't want you to do it. I'm like, it'll be fine. So I literally have no idea what a fashion show looks like. So I get to the place down in the city, and I get out of the car. I walk in, and there's like 100 female, beautiful professional models. And I'm like, why am I here? And they said, hey, this is a young lady you're going to walk out with. We had some Harley Davidson gear on. I was in some short boxers and a T-shirt. It was kind of awkward for me. But I'm standing there and all these women are just changing clothes, and you're like, is this how it works? Like, I'm feeling very, I'm like trying not to look. I'm like turning away, just feel like something that I wasn't brought up to be around. But I walked out there, and it was completely miserable for me to walk out on the catwalk up top with people taking photos. But I will say, you should ask Darren the story, but Darren loved it. In fact, Darren, I left after my part, and he said, yeah, some guy asked if he could take some photos. He thinks I have a future in the modeling industry. So that might tee you up for when you talk to him later in the month or whenever. But it was just some fun stuff that, I probably would never had that experience. It's a once in a lifetime awkward thing for me, but I'm just thankful that people cared enough about the Revolution team at the time. I think there's a couple guys from the Red Sox and a couple Patriots, and I think maybe somebody from the Jay Giles band was there, which was one of my favorite bands at the time, right? Centerfold was like an epic song when I was in high school. So it was just a fun day, and just some good laughs that we have as you look back on it.
I say people can see behind me at the time you had the hair flowing. Like, I get it. Oh, Darren, he had the like Tarzan hair at the time. Yeah. That's what he became known for. I think you do need to have like was it the last scene in The Hangover where they have the camera that they find from the night out, and they're like,
absolutely.
we're gonna get together. We're going to look at this camcorder footage one time, and then we're never going to acknowledge it ever again. I think you need to have that viewing party together.
Well, that actually made me think of something. So one of the cool parts about, the MLS at the time, it was on TV a lot, right? You see some ESPN highlights and a lot of neat stuff. So I can remember I was flying across country one night, and I was watching the movie came on, Rounders, with
one of my favorites.
So I don't know. There's a scene with I can't think of his name, but he's sitting there eating his Oreos, right?
John Malkovich.
Yeah, John Malkovich. He's sitting there, and in the background, he's got a soccer match in the background, right? So if you don't know it, this is the Columbus Crew versus the New England Revolution in Columbus, right? And there's a moment when ball comes to me, I rifle with my left foot, it rings off the crossbar, and I think it goes out of bounds. And then there's a close up, and I put my hand on my head and push my hair back. And that was just one moment. I'm like, I can remember I'm flying across the country and I'm half asleep and I'm watching Rounders, and I'm like, man, how cool would that be to be in there? And then one of my buddies about a week later said, hey man, have you ever seen yourself at Rounders? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, there's a scene in the TV in the background with John Malkovich where you're in there. So that was one of the cool things about the New England Revolution experience. I think I had a goal call back in that Columbus game. I did get an assist, I believe, but one of those things, hey, forever, I'm now connected with the Rounders, so that's one of the things I'm also proud of. So
awesome.
That is one of my favorite movies, and the first time I realized that was a Revs game that was on in the background, it blew my mind. I paused it like 10 times, like, that's a Revs game in the background. Well, we got to at least talk a little bit about the game itself and these goals. So you get to the 20th minute of that first ever game in Tampa Bay. It's 0-0. Take me through your memory of what will forever be the first goal in New England Revolution history.
Yeah, as a target forward, my job is when the ball goes out wide, work, see if you can work to the back post and then attack the ball at the near post. And I believe Alexi got the ball and he sprayed one out wide to Welton. He just drove down the line and hit a perfect cross, beat the keeper. And literally I just arrived a little bit late at the back post, and with my left foot just slotted it home. It was pretty much at the time, I had a pretty good touch. These days I don't, but it was just an easy, simple finish. And then everybody got excited, right? That's what you did. You ran around like a crazy person, hugging each other. And, for me, I think I tried to find Welton because he gave me a great delivery. But it was fun. I mean, we're up 1-0. We're going to put these guys to the sword. It's great. Carlos Valderrama's on the other side of the field, and, we're up 1-0. So it was a great moment, taking that lead. And then, the second goal, I guess second half, I think it was just a ball came in, and nothing too exciting, just a goal for me, right? We're chasing the game. I think it ended up 3-2. I mean, I remember the one I missed more than I remember the second one that I scored. So as simple as that, right?
I feel like it's such a big thing now because there's been so many expansion teams in MLS. Every single time there's a new team, there's all these conversations before their first game about who's going to score the first goal. Like, I know that Diego Fagundes scored the first goal in Austin FC history, and we had it again this year with San Diego FC, and it's sort of this part of club history for all of these teams of who scored the first goal in club history. Like, was there any conversation at all before that game amongst guys of like, I want to be the first guy to score a goal for this team? Like, was it even a thought?
Not to me. We just wanted to win the game.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, we're down here. The messaging is always, hey, it's their home field. They're supposed to win. That's the expectation. The pressure's on them. Let's go out and take care of business. And, my job was to score a goal. So I didn't feel, it wasn't a surprise that I scored. I looked at our roster based on how we were set up. The center forward is the guy that's supposed to score a goal. So to me, I always thought it was going to be me. When it was me, it wasn't that exciting other than, put us up. Our goal is to win the game, not score 2 goals and lose the game. So
I do love, at least now, being able to look back 29 years later, that the first goal in Revs history it's a goal worthy of being the first goal in club history. You could think you could have something where it sort of gets bobbled over the line, or it's a deflection or something like that. Like, it's a great ball from Lawless down the left wing. It's a great cross from Welton. It's a solid first time finish inside the near post. Like, it's a goal that I think feels worthy of being the first goal in club history.
No, I mean, it was much better than the one we scored against New England, right? The own goal that Darren was involved in.
Yeah, exactly, right?
So, I mean, but I will tell you that game, I think they had 48,500. I remember seeing that flash up on the board. But man, like, that was a fun game with some really talented players. I think I had I don't know if it was a header or a volley that Tony Miola maybe separated his shoulder on the save. He made a great save. But late in that game, for that to be an own goal from, was it Nicola Curricula, I believe?
Yeah.
And I mean, it was, I mean, hear 48,500 people get quiet that quickly. That is amazing. I know there's the Boston-New York rivalry, so I just remember going to the locker room, and that was a fun, excited locker room. I know, just looking around, there was like celebrities in there. What, man, this is great. We just took them down in their own place with a big crowd.
I feel like that's what guys talk about all the time too, is like, obviously it's incredible to score a goal at your home stadium, hear a crowd of 30,000, 40,000 plus erupt and cheer for you and feel that energy. But guys, it feels like more often reference scoring goals on the road and hearing the absolute silence of a road crowd. It feels like there's almost more of a rush in that.
Taylor Twellman just said that in that recent piece that we did with him.
He
that was
did,
like the
yeah.
first thing he said about playing on the road was that it's good to score at home, but it's better on the road, and just hearing the dead silence.
Yeah, something about it.
Yeah, that I would agree with Taylor on that. There's something, especially if you can go over to the supporters group and just give them a look, or maybe give them the old shush, or just say, "Hey guys, sorry, we're gonna win the game," right? I think some of this with social media has gotten a little bit out of control in the last 10 or 12 years, just, the taunting and the nastiness of it. But like, there's a lot of stuff that happens on the field that you don't necessarily hear, that starts off as trash talk. By the end of the game, whoever wins, everybody's usually pretty gracious, and man, you guys took it to us today. I think that's the beauty of the game. But, certainly silencing a crowd, a big crowd on the road is one of the most, I guess, maybe exciting things you can do as a goal scorer, for sure.
And now I know you've mentioned the fact that those were the only 2 goals that you scored for the Revs. You were ultimately released just a few months later. But did you take any shootout attempts through those first couple of months?
I did. So we were playing the Galaxy. So I started, I think, the first 8 or 9 games. And then after that, I got dropped. And, one of the things I learned from a high school coach is always be ready, whether you start, come off the bench. So we were playing the Galaxy, and didn't get to start that day. But, I sat right next to the coaches. So anytime the coach looked down the bench who they could put in, I could just look back, and he's like, I'm the first guy he sees, right? So I think we're in the 89th minute, and somebody went down with an injury, and he looked down. He's like, can anybody go? And I popped up because I had my guards on and my socks pulled up, and I was taped up, and I was ready to go. So I said, yes, sir. So he put me in. So somebody came off, and we had a free kick, and I believe I had a header that I maybe put over the bar. Lexi drove a ball in, or somebody drove a ball in, and I won it and had a chance on, I guess, Jorge Campos was in goal. And then the game ended, and then they're like, hey, you want to take a shootout? So I did take a shootout on that game. I believe I scored it. But yeah, I mean, you always got to be ready is how I've always learned to do it. I know there's if you watch benches these days, there's a long warm up time, and guys have to put their game jersey on and, you know, put all their stuff and shin guard. So like I was always the guy that I'm just ready to go. So if I'm coming off the bench, starting whatever my role, I like to embrace and do the best of my ability. So I did score a goal, I believe, on Campos in that game.
So we're gonna talk in depth with Darren Sawatsky and Jeff Causey on one of the next episodes of this podcast about the shootout and all that. As a striker, did you like the idea of that kind of shootout?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a penalty. Yeah, anytime you can score and it's just you and the goalkeeper, I fancy my chances, right? This is a funny story. So we did play DC up there in one of the games, and one of my biggest mistake as a professional, or maybe as a soccer player my entire life. They called I think it was an offsides call, I believe. It might have been on me. But I turned around and Jeff Causey was in the goal for New England, and the ball was it was dead. He put his foot on it and rolled it like 2 yards forward, I think, just to reposition it before he kicked it. And right when he did that, I saw that and I realized this is a live ball. So I took it and I took 2 touches, and then I thought I was going to get called for, delaying a restart. And I pulled it wide, and then he gave a goal kick, and I'm like, I just had an open net. I just missed an open net off. You know, I read the game perfectly, and I just didn't realize. I mean, I didn't think the refs would let me get away with it. You know, I don't think we really trust referees too much these days. But even back then, I thought I pulled one off, and then I tugged it wide, unfortunately. So.
Oh man. Well, so obviously the next part of the story, and we'll start to kind of wrap up here. But the next part of that story, after you score the first 2 goals with the Revs, is that you mentioned 8 or 9 appearances with the club right before contracts ended up becoming guaranteed. Unfortunately, your journey with the Revs ended in June. But what were your options at that point? And then sort of what was the decision that led you eventually to take the path that you took?
So my options were, I went on waivers, I guess, and they said that I could get re-signed by another MLS team at the minimum. At the time, it was $24,000. That was one option. The other option, I could have got traded. I was told later that there was down the road with a trade possibly to DC. That's from a couple guys that shared that with me. I don't know how accurate that was, but that would have been nice. And then the other option was to re-sign back in Richmond, where I played in '95 and won the Open Cup. Dennis was still back coaching. So I kind of evaluated it, and I felt like, you know what, I want to go somewhere where I get to play. If, say, I get picked up by somebody else at $24,000 a year, it's difficult to live in some of these cities. I wanted to bet on myself, and being in an environment where I'm playing every day, I think gave me the best chance to fight my way back up into MLS. And that didn't happen, but I do remember I ended up back in Richmond, and that was the year of the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. And we had the Italian Olympic team coming to play a friendly with the Richmond Kickers. So I think you maybe have heard this from me before, but my first game back, I didn't start the first couple games with Richmond. I had to earn my spot, but we did have an international exhibition at City Stadium with the U23 Italian Olympic team. One of their overage players was Pagliuca, who was in the goal at the World Cup final when they lost some pens to the Brazilians in '94. So I remember watching him play, and then we went up 1-0 on them. I scored the goal in that game, so that was a pretty cool highlight moment for my career. But when I look back on that roster, I didn't really understand how good that roster was. Alessandro Nesta played for them. Cannavaro was in the midfield for them, or center back. And then the backup keeper for Pagliuca was a guy named Buffon, who you guys have probably heard of, right? So we're in the field with these guys. Now, they were under 23s at the time, but it was great. So, I talked earlier about the story stuff that happened at City Stadium. That was one of the iconic moments. We lost the game 4-1. I do remember right after the game, guys running over to swap jerseys with me. So I thought that was a nice compliment. So I think I gave up my shorts, my socks. I was out there in my sliders, basically, and an Italian jersey that was way too small. But that's how they wear them, right?
Say, do you know, so you got one of the Italian jerseys? Whose jersey did you get?
I have no idea. I gave it to a young kid I coached because he's a big Italian soccer fan. So say, hey, man.
What a guy.
Yeah, Ben Messer is his name. So, it's funny because I think before I got released, we actually had a game with Fiorentina. We had an exhibition game, and that was a fun game to play in. I think it was maybe 0s at the half, and I think we ended up getting beat pretty good in the second half. But I believe I started that game and had a few minutes against those guys, and just the quality that the Italian teams had. I mean, it was amazing. Everybody here in America, we always had a little bit of raw athleticism and a little bit of technical ability, but those guys are big, strong, and fast and technical, which is always kind of fun to learn from.
Well, we know you obviously still have some connections with the Revs. Darren Sawatsky's your head coach at the Richmond Kickers. Do you keep in touch with any of the guys from that 96 team?
Not really. I mean, I follow the guys on LinkedIn. I'm not really on social media. But, depending on where I am, might be in a different city. You run into different guys that played in MLS you played against, guys against in college. And I always said the soccer community is a really warm one. You might not have always got along, but it was just kind of nice to see the respect that we had for each other. So, being in the youth game for a little while, coaching, you'd run into almost, just pick a bunch of different names, right? Because most of these guys wanted to give back to the game once they got out of the professional game. So I really respect all these different players. It's fun watching the success they've had. I love watching Alexi on TV stirring the pot. I think,
Sure
he always stirred the pot here.
He does enjoy that.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that was probably underestimated by Alexi, like his ability to challenge how people thought about the game, and again, who knows? Maybe he believes everything he says, maybe not. But he gets you to think about it, right? He stuck up for all of us young guys. I mean, he was on a guaranteed contract, was the understanding, in New England, and we had a couple of miserable training sessions with Frank Stapleton, who just like wore us down. Like, typically, the training rhythm is maybe first day back is light, next day's hard, and then the next 2 days leading into the game, you kind of taper off. There was no tapering off with Frank Stapleton. He was like, we're going to be balls to the wall. We're going to go 100%. He played in these games. If his team was down, the game would extend till his team either caught up or was down probably 8 or 10 goals, right? That's how he's wired, which I love. I think it's a great thing, but it's not a great way to coach young, talented athletes. So I do remember this moment when Alexi must have gone and had a personal meeting with him and said, hey, man, you're wearing us out. We're not fresh. And then so Frank calls a team meeting in Babson College locker room, and we're all sitting in there, and he comes in and he's like, so Alexi tells me that I'm training you guys too hard. And like everybody just starts looking around like, I think, all right, I'm not, my contract's not guaranteed till like the first week of July. So everybody just sat there quietly, but he had the, the stones to step up and look out for us. I think maybe Ian Fraser was at Canadian International, might have had the guarantees. So I think he spoke up, but it was just one of those awkward moments where I'm like, man, this is leadership right here. He's sticking up for us. Didn't work out for me long-term, but I did appreciate how Alexi operated and looked out for all of us. And then maybe you've heard this story. Back in the AOL days, the chat rooms, right? There's no Twitter or X or whatever you call it. But I remember being in the chat room one day with Alexi as a Revs chat board on AOL, and they were hammering Alexi, like nastiest stuff you would ever hear. And Alexi's sitting in the room, I think it was like maybe a max of 30 people in there. So I'm sitting in there, I'm like, and Alexi's like, hey guys, this is Alexi. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, we're just messing around, man. Just kind of, right? And Alexi goes, man, I respected you guys a lot more when you didn't like me and you had all these other opinions. But you know what? Now that you have no backbone, I'm done. And then he left the room. So it was just this great reminder of like, stand up for what you believe in. It doesn't mean you're right or wrong, but at least have the conviction to look out for one another. So,
as a centre forward, was Coach Stapleton harder to play for you? Is some of the lore around Frank is that he thought he was still good enough to play in MLS, never went coaching it. Was he harder for you as a centre forward to coach or play for?
So, I mean, I always felt like, I think he was good for me because I think he had the nuance of the game. I mean, he was wonderful in the air. I think, I think every time he headed the ball, it probably was on target. So he was a very gifted attacking player. So I did learn things from him and I appreciated him. I think the one thing that he maybe missed is that, it doesn't matter who the center forward is if the service isn't there. If you got your center forward doing defensive work down in the box on the other end of the field in the midfield for your other players, it's going to be hard to get back up front and get on the other end of a cross. So I think that's the part that he maybe missed. But I got, obviously Dennis Violet was a wonderful winger for Man United. I mean, Frank had a storied career, great goal scorer. But I also had the opportunity when I ended up back in Richmond playing for a guy named Colin Clark, who was an Irish international, scored in the '86 Mexico World Cup. And, he was also an attacking center forward. And, he was incredibly hard on me, but I loved it. I mean, I think, those guys that have been in the trenches and play at these higher levels, you can learn so much from them. So, I mean, I really appreciated my time with Frank Stapleton. Obviously maybe didn't see eye to eye and how he wanted me to play all the time, and I didn't end up there for long. But I appreciate the opportunity that he and Brian O'Donovan gave me. I think if I had one beef with Frank Stapleton and Brian O'Donovan, the day I got released, and maybe you've heard this before, but we knew cuts were coming in the next 2 days, and there was talk about bringing Joe Max Moore in, so they were trying to free up money and release some players. So I understood all of that. That's just the business of it. But I talked to Ron McEachin the day before and said, hey, you're close to getting back in the starting lineup. So I literally got to practice the next day early. I got in there, I got dressed, and I walked down to the field to do a little bit of finishing on my own just to sharpen up, right? So I'm out there, and all of a sudden, Ron McEachin walks out and it's like, hey, they need to see you in the locker room. I said, well, I just talked to him later. He said, no, they need to see you now. So I had no idea that I'm about to get cut. So I walk back up, and I see Alexi walking the other way, and he's like, where are you going? I said, they just called me into the office. They want to meet with me for a little bit. And he's like, holy, and a couple expletives. They're going to cut you right now. And that was the moment I knew that, and my days were over there. So I walked in, and I felt like, I'm pretty sure I was in there for 45 minutes to an hour as they kind of told me all these things about why it wasn't a good fit, and, really appreciated my professionalism. And I mean, to me, it would have been really nice for me to walk in there and say, hey, guys, they say, hey, Rob, we appreciate your service. This isn't going to work out. We're going to release you today. And I would have been great, shake hands, and we're good. But I was in there for way too long. If you're going to cut me, I'm a big boy. I can take it.
Just rip off the Band-Aid.
Rip off the Band-Aid. So this is the fun part for Darren. So Darren and I were roommates, and I bought the furniture. We had these big, great couches that I loved, and I kept the tags on them, right? Just in case, you never know. So I think Darren remembers it that I went home after I got cut. I called the furniture and said, hey, I don't know that the furniture's going to work out. Can you come pick it up? So I think he came back, and by the time he got back from training, there was no furniture. It was gone. So you had to be a little bit practical there, right? So,
I mean,
but I have nothing but great memories of that. Yeah. So it was an incredible experience. I think Brian and Frank were in over their head a little bit, but I think everybody was. I mean, if you looked around the league, people didn't, building a team is what I've learned being in the professional game the last 6 years, like I have. It's very difficult. It's not just what the guy can do on the field, how he fits in with his teammates. And do you have the right leadership structure? And then, the game keeps changing. It's like, every couple of weeks, there's different things that are more important to different people. So it's given me a great appreciation for the Crafts taking a chance on that. I'm not sure how they're perceived all the time up there from the soccer community. They've done a great job running a football team. But I really appreciate Mr. Kraft and Jonathan giving me, as a young soccer player, an opportunity to play in the Revs uniform, and super thankful for some of the lessons that I learned from those guys.
You mentioned Frank Stapleton trained with you. Did anyone ever crunch him in a tackle?
I don't know that you're allowed to, right? Like, if you take out the coach and you do his knee, like, are you going to get to suit up the next game? I don't know. I mean, it's one of those good questions. So, to be fair, I'm not a defender, so I wasn't going near him.
Well, it puts you in such a tough position, because it's like, one, you could say, well, I need to pull out of this tackle because he's a coach. But then he could be the type of coach where you pull out of the tackle and he's like, no, you pulled out of a tackle. I don't want you on my field. Doesn't matter who it is. Go into the tackle. So that's a tough spot. Well, yeah. Rob, I'll leave you with one last question, just because you ended up having such an unbelievable career that's still going on now with the Richmond Kickers. But when you retired as a player, I believe it was all-time leader in minutes, appearances, goals, assists, pretty much everything. But you will also forever be etched into the New England Revolution record books. Like, what is it like as a player to know that you are in the Revs record books with something that can quite literally never be taken away from you? There is no one else who can surpass this. You will forever be the guy who scored the first goal for an original MLS team.
Well, I mean, that's always cool, and it's maybe a Trivial Pursuit question for some random crazy people. I think this will be my best memory for you right now. So the first home game we played, I'm not sure who we played. I just know United. I was wearing. Okay, so I had a red sports coat on. We wore a tie to the stadium. We had a meal at a hotel beforehand, and when I walked up, there was just a bank of, I don't know, a couple hundred kids and families just waiting as we walked in, and I walked over to sign autographs because I felt like, hey, if there's a kid that came out to this game to get Rob Ukrop's autograph, I'm going to make sure he can see my name. He can see that I'm number 19, and I'm going to look him in the eye and speak to him. And I signed a bunch of autographs that day before the game, which is unusual because, most of the soccer career, you maybe see somebody after a game, but not really before. So there's a young man and his dad is Scott Sawatsky, who now lives in Richmond. And I just remember I signed it and I said, hey, how you doing? Thanks for coming out. I just asked him about soccer and his life. And, it was like a 2 or 3 minute interaction. And then fast forward about 10 years later, I'm playing, I've retired. I'm playing in a co-ed indoor soccer league. And the referee is like, hey, man, I'm a big fan of yours. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I used to live in New England. I used to watch you play for the Revs. He goes, every year I'll put your name up for the all Revs team, because he goes, you know why? And I said, not really. I mean, I know I scored the first 2 goals. And he's like, that first home game, you actually spoke to me and my son, and you signed an autograph, and you gave us a couple minutes of your time. And so you just never know, like, as a professional athlete, the impact that you can have on people's lives. And not that I had a huge impact on them, but just being kind. I think sometimes you get lost in the contracts and, well, I need this or I need that. But, as a professional athlete, one of the things that I really embrace and am proud to say is that you have this ability to connect with young kids and give them some inspiration and some hope that, maybe they can one day do something like this, or maybe it's something else they find confidence in and have great success in. So I'm so grateful for the Crafts providing that opportunity to be part of that team initially in 1996. And, there's a lot of fun teammates. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the old trainer. I think his name was Ara. He was maybe the best personality in the whole group. Some of the hijinks in the locker room that some other people can tell you, taping different body parts, and just a great, fun personality that, to a place where I think Frank was maybe a little bit too stuffy and tight. The trainer, Ara, he brought this positive energy into the locker room, and it just made it more fun to be around. So again, really thank you guys for the time this morning. It's been fun.
Yeah, Rob, we could talk to you all day, but I know you're a busy man with many things to do, and we very much appreciate you taking the time. I'll give you 10 more years. We'll get back on with you for the 40th anniversary, and we'll relive everything all again, if that works for you.
Sounds great. Really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Keep up the good work. Telling the story of the Revs.
Thanks so much, Rob. We really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks, of course, as well to our presenting sponsor, Massachusetts 250. 250 years ago, Massachusetts started a revolution. The Massachusetts 250 campaign is commemorating our first 250 throughout the state. Plan your visit at massachusetts250.org. Revolutions start here. Come see what's next. And we will see you next time on the Far Post Podcast, when we are going to continue some of these stories with Darren Zawatsky and Jeff Causey.
We have some new ammunition now for Darren, too,
we do.
After that conversation.
It's going to be a conversation that goes so far beyond Major League Soccer shootouts and that first ever home game. We're going to need about 3 hours with Darren, especially with Jeff there alongside him. So we will see everybody next time on the Far Post Podcast.